Welcome back. All right, so what I've got on the board here is the 16 teams currently in playoff positions, meaning Montreal's in there, the Rangers are not. I wanted to keep this simple, so there's a chance Montreal doesn't make the playoffs, but there's a chance that they do. And out west, I think things are pretty settled in terms of who's making it. It's just a matter of in what order. So looking to the east first, and I'll give my honest impression for how teams are playing. The Toronto Maple Leafs over the last month, a record of 8-5-1, scoring 3.43 goals per game, allowing 3.21 goals against per game. Playing well in parts, but it will be interesting to see if they can really turn things on come playoff time. Tavares has been their leading scorer over the last month, 14 games, 12 goals, 6 assists, 18 points. He is, of course, a pending unrestricted free agent, but I think he's playing his best hockey that he has as a Toronto Maple Leaf over the last month. And then the question of goaltender is in there as well. So what I've got on the board is the top scorer for each team over the last month and goaltender or goaltenders. And with Toronto, it feels like it's a two-headed beast where you've got Wall and Stolarz. Either goaltender you can make an argument for to be the starter for game one. But I think for the Leafs, if they go far, I would not be surprised if they utilize both goaltenders to achieve that goal. Now, the first round matchup they would have currently would be Ottawa. We would all be very happy to see a Battle of Ontario in the first round. Got my fingers crossed we see that come to pass. Toronto and Ottawa haven't met in the playoffs in a long time, but their series were always very interesting and very entertaining. So let's rekindle that battle, shall we? Now Tampa, right behind them, and may very well spoil this whole idea of an Ottawa-Toronto first-round matchup. Tampa 9-4-1 over the last month. So the ones in red have a top 10 points percentage, top 10 record over the last month. The ones in blue do not. And so Tampa's in red with a 9-4-1 record, 3.93 goals scored per game, allowing 2.64 goals against per game. Kucherov's playing his best hockey at the best time of year to do it. 13 games, 6 goals, 18 assists, 24 points. And Vasilevsky, the starting goaltender. The Tampa Bay is one of those teams that if something happened to their starting goaltender, rightfully people would panic. Vasilevsky has been playing very well over the last few months. His numbers have been fantastic. And I think he's flown under the radar because people are paying so much attention to Hellebuck. They have been paying attention to Thompson as well, although Logan Thompson's numbers have fallen off a bit. And there's other goaltenders that get a lot of attention, like, for instance, coming out of Four Nations, Binnington gets a lot of attention. And so I think Vasilevsky's been under the radar. Tampa does frighten me. And I would say that if I was coaching a team in the first round, I would rather have to coach against Toronto than against Tampa. Tampa's just got that reputation. And even though it's been a couple of years since we saw a long run from the Tampa Bay Lightning, this might be a year where we see it again. Because a lot of those core pieces are still playing well. And there's still enough there from their last Stanley Cup in 2021 that I think they should be. Feared is the word I'm going to be using here, but respected is another one that you could, or just, maybe you have some concern. Maybe you wouldn't go to fear, maybe some concern. So Florida, 6-6-1 over the last month, scoring 2.31 goals per game and allowing 2.46 goals against per game. They miss Matthew Tkachuk greatly. Last night's game, they also didn't have Barkov. And Florida's been kind of meandering. And I think part of, not really an explanation, but an example of that, Sam Reinhart, 13 games, 6 goals, 8 assists, 14 points. He's their leading scorer over the last month. Very up and down season for Reinhart. He started off fantastic, looked like he was going to be a 50-goal scorer again, might get to 100-plus points. But that has kind of quieted down. And Florida's quieted down as well. Bobrovsky, of course, their starting goaltender. Can they turn it on come playoff time? The back-to-back losses against Montreal, then they lose last night against Toronto. It's got me wondering, could Florida find themselves out of the playoffs early this year? It may depend on the first-round matchup. If they end up against Tampa, I kind of like Tampa's odds there, to be honest. I think that Tampa is due for another run. Florida's had runs in two years in a row where they've gone all the way to the final. And so there's that possibility that now they're due for maybe a bit of a shorter run in the playoffs. Maybe they do get knocked out by Tampa in that first round in a Battle of Florida. And just think about how amazing that would be to have the Battle of Ontario and the Battle of Florida. I mean, the NHL would be quite happy. I think ESPN and Sportsnet would be really happy with that too. So maybe that's how things will turn out. Washington, 9-4-1 over the last month, 3.67 goals scored per game, allowing 3.07 goals against per game. The goals against has been coming up, and that has to be concerning. The Washington Capitals have won a lot of games, very close games. They've been good in close games, but when that razor-thin margin starts to go the other way, you've got to adjust. Now, Ovechkin's been their leading scorer over the last month, 14 games, 8 goals, 10 assists, 18 points. The chase for the Gretzky record's almost complete. Maybe that's a bit distracting to the team. Maybe, like, they're not going to tell us they're distracted by the chase, but maybe a little bit. I've talked about Thompson. Now, Thompson got pulled out of last night's game, upper body injury apparently, and you have to wonder if Thompson's been fighting some sort of injury throughout, I would say, the last month. I would go that far. Now, they do have a good record over the last month. There's no reason for panic. They're way ahead of second place, but I don't know how scared of the Capitals I would be going into that first round. They do have a lot of different goal scorers. They can play a physical game. They can play various types of game. But I don't know how scared I would be if I was playing against them in the first round. And right now, their first round opponent would be Montreal. And pressure is also something that's I think a little stronger with the Capitals than it would be for the Canadians, obviously. Canadians, young up-and-coming team. The Capitals do have some good young players there. But if you're going to get Ovechkin a second Stanley Cup ring, I don't know that you're going to be set up any better than what you have right now. And so that is where the pressure lies, I think, with the Capitals. Now, Carolina, they're 11-2 over the last month, scoring 3.69 goals per game and allowing 2.08 goals against per game. Seth Jarvis, 13 games, 7 goals, 7 assists, 14 points, is their leading scorer. Both Freddie Anderson and Pyotr Kochetkov have played important games. I think Freddie Anderson's the starter come playoff time, but if they have to go to Kochetkov, it won't surprise anybody because they've been pretty honestly good about making sure that they make that switch in goal when they have to. And Rod Brind'Amour is pretty good at deciding which goalie to deploy where. And I think the Canes are set up pretty well. I do think that while Carolina has struggled with scoring in later rounds, I wouldn't want to play them in round one. I think they get through round one. Right now, their round one opponent would be New Jersey. I don't see New Jersey being able to stop Carolina. Now, that can change, absolutely can change when we get to the actual series, because then you're not doing the same schedule of, all the travel and everything. You just have one opponent to focus on. That's it. And it changes the whole thing, everything. This is why some teams that are really, really good during the regular season struggle in the playoffs, and vice versa. Teams can struggle during the regular season, stay above that playoff line till the final day of the season, and then in the playoffs, they can be dangerous. New Jersey doesn't look dangerous. They're 7-6-1 over the last month, scoring 2.89 goals per game, allowing 3.29 goals against per game. Jesper Bratt's been trying his best. He's leading them in scoring over the last month. 14 games, 3 goals, 15 assists, 18 points. And Jacob Markstrom has shown in the past he can be a good goaltender in the playoffs. He's shown that in Vancouver and he's shown that in Calgary. He can be a good goaltender in the playoffs. But I don't know that I see New Jersey as being a scary opponent at all for Carolina. I think that if there's a sweep that I would look at and go, that's the most likely, I think Carolina, New Jersey, to me, looks like the most likely sweep in the East if one of these series was going to end that way. And I'm including Washington, Montreal there because I think the Habs win at least one game in that series because no pressure. But for New Jersey, there's just too many injuries and key injuries. The key injuries are what hurt. And, I mean, without Jack Hughes, can they generate enough against Carolina? And I do have my doubts about them being able to get past that ridiculous Carolina defense and just how good Carolina is all around. Now, Ottawa, the number one wild card, they're 9-4-1 over the last month, 3.07 goals scored per game, allowing 2.93 goals against per game. Batherson, their leading scorer over the last month, 14 games, 5 goals, 7 assists, 12 points. I've talked about this recently. I'll say it again here. I'm always surprised at how many individual players in Ottawa aren't necessarily scoring as many points as you might think. Brady Tkachuk being a key guy there. But Linus Ullmark in net has at times been spectacular. If he can be spectacular in the playoffs, say in a series against Toronto, maybe, right? Ullmark has an up and down, and not a lot of history in the playoffs in the NHL, but sort of an up and down experience as a starter. And so he is capable of being one of the best goaltenders in the league. If they can find that goaltender for round one against Toronto, it could be a long summer in Toronto. Ottawa has zero pressure if that's the series we see in the first round. In fact, I don't think Ottawa has any pressure no matter who they play in the first round because it's their first time in the playoffs in a long time. Ottawa fans are just going to be very happy to see them in the playoffs, and any playoff victories would be seen as just a bonus. The excitement about Ottawa is not just for this season, it's beyond, which is a very similar position to where Montreal is. Now, over the last month, Montreal's 5-4-4. To their benefit, though, a lot of the rest of the teams chasing down this playoff spot haven't been playing better than that. So Montreal still holds that spot. They're scoring an even 3 goals per game and allowing 3.31 goals against per game. So they have lost 8 out of 13 games over the last month. However, they've only lost 4 of those games in regulation, so they're keeping themselves in the hunt. Nick Suzuki, the leading scorer for this team over the last month, 13 games, 6 goals, 8 assists, 14 points. I will never say anything negative about Nick Suzuki. Not going to happen. Montembeault in net, is he underrated? Probably a bit. Montembeault has had some ups and downs here and there. Dobesh is not a guy who I think is going to see any games come playoff time. And if we get Montreal and Washington, if it is Thompson against Montembeault, that could be a very interesting series because Montembeault in the playoffs, no idea what to expect there. And Thompson, while he had some success with Vegas, he was not the goaltender of record when they went all the way to the final and won. That was Aiden Hill that took over. So Thompson may have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder and want to prove something too. He has already shown this year that when he has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, and I think he did after Vegas traded him, he can be excellent. So that could be a really fun series either way if Montreal ends up being the team to stay above the playoff line, which I wouldn't be surprised if it's the Rangers either. I would say that if I'm Washington, I probably would rather play the Montreal Canadiens than the New York Rangers. Rangers have some experience. They have Igor Shesterkin. They have Adam Fox. There are some reasons why I think Washington would probably prefer Montreal as a first-round matchup to the New York Rangers. And then there's, of course, Columbus still being in the mix. I don't think Washington would be necessarily scared of Columbus, but should they be? Because if Columbus makes it, then everybody's playing for Johnny Hockey, and just that emotional outpouring, that's something to try to go up against, and may not be a lot of fun. Then we go out west. The Winnipeg Jets. Record of 9-5 over the last month, scoring 3.07 goals per game and allowing 2.43 goals against per game. But there's been this sort of weakness lately with Winnipeg. They haven't seemed quite as dominant. Kyle Connor over the last month, 14 games, 7 goals, 9 assists, 16 points. Connor Hellebuck, the goaltender, of course. And if you're talking about a team that would, wrap their starter in bubble wrap to make sure he doesn't get hurt anytime soon, Hellebuck's the guy. May very well win the Hart, may very well win the Vezina. But what happens if we get Winnipeg against, say, St. Louis in the first round? Or if it's Winnipeg and Minnesota, right? I think Winnipeg matches up better against Minnesota than St. Louis, but either of those series would be probably pretty fantastic hockey from start to finish. I don't think that Winnipeg is scary opposition come playoff time because they haven't gone on a long run since 2018. They have not shown in the playoffs that they're capable of raising their game as they have in the regular season, and they need to show that this year. So there's pressure in Winnipeg to show what they can do. I would say that those first 2 games of whatever series we have, whether it's St. Louis or Minnesota, is going to tell us a lot about the Winnipeg Jets. If they come out of those first 2 games and they're leading series 2-0, they're good. And they very likely win that series. If they come out, with a split, things get a little bit shakier because then you're looking for a win in St. Louis if that's who ends up being the number 2 wild card. And Minnesota could be tough to get a win too. Although we'll get to Minnesota and talk about how things are a challenge for them. I think if you're the Jets, you'd rather have Minnesota than St. Louis in the first round. And I think that's very likely true, although teams will not say, we'd rather play those guys, because you don't. Fans have learned not to chant, we want that team, because it tends to age poorly. Dallas, my Stanley Cup pick before the season started. I am leaning towards leaving my Stanley Cup pick as Dallas once the playoffs roll around. It's the only time that I change my pick is when the playoffs are starting. They're 10-2-2 over the last month, scoring 3.48 goals per game, allowing 2.36 goals per game. There's been some good fortune there in that they've won some games that I don't know how they won them. But Rope Hintz is a big part of it. 12 games, 3 goals, 14 assists, 17 points over the last month to lead them in scoring. And Jake Ottinger, the goaltender, while Casey DeSmith has been very good as the backup, it's obviously Ottinger's net. And Dallas is still trying to hunt down the Winnipeg Jets in that first place spot in the West and potentially the entire National Hockey League. It is possible that when the season's done, the dust's cleared, that the top 3 teams in the Central are all going to be pretty near the top of the overall standings. This division, to me, at the top anyways, I think the best in the National Hockey League. Which brings us to Colorado. 11-2-2 over this past month. 3.60 goals scored per game and allowing a paltry 1.93 goals against per game. Yeah, they don't allow goals. Leading them in scoring, both Makar and McKinnon with the same totals. 15 games, 7 goals, 13 assists, 20 points. And Makar and McKinnon being atop the division, or atop the leaderboard does not surprise me in the slightest. And Mackenzie Blackwood's the starter. I think they'd be okay if they needed to use Wedgwood for whatever reason during the playoffs, but Blackwood's the guy. He did get the extension after they got him from San Jose, and I mentioned in that recent video how they've kind of revamped their whole lineup, and their record's been great over the last month. So, of Dallas and Colorado, I do think Dallas is the better team, but I think what Colorado did during the season to fix their goaltending and then at the deadline to really ramp up their center spot, I think they're going to give Dallas everything they can handle. That series may very well end up going the full 7 games. Now we go to the Pacific. The Vegas Golden Knights, 9-3-2 over the last month, 3.79 goals scored per game, 2.21 goals against per game. Jack Eichel, their leading scorer over the last month, 14 games, 8 goals, 13 assists, 21 points. Aiden Hill, the starting goaltender. If they have to go to Samsonov, that'll be because Hill got hurt. Hill's the guy. And the Vegas Golden Knights are in a very similar position to where they were a couple years ago, where they weren't being seen as, I mean, they were a favorite, but not the favorite. They were seen as being, that maybe that not first or second tier, kind of in the middle, and then they won the cup. And they didn't start the playoffs all that great against Winnipeg, but did they finish them well or what? So maybe Vegas is due for another run. And if they do so, they'll be against either Minnesota or St. Louis in the first round, barring the LA Kings or the Edmonton Oilers catching them, which is looking less and less likely with every passing day. Now, of these two teams, I think Vegas would prefer to play against Minnesota, the same as I think the Jets would prefer to play against Minnesota. I don't know that teams want to play St. Louis in the first round. In fact, if the Blues continued the run they're on, and if Colorado had some kind of power failure between now and the end of the season, and St. Louis jumped into third spot and ended up playing against Dallas, and Colorado dropped into a wild card spot, I think teams would be like, we don't want to play Colorado necessarily, but we're glad we dodged St. Louis. St. Louis's run has been ridiculous, but we'll see. Now, the LA Kings, 11-3-1 record, 3.47 goals scored per game over the last month, allowing 1.8 goals against per game over the last month. So those numbers are fantastic. Anze Kopitar must be getting close to the playoffs. He's their leading scorer over the last month. 15 games, 5 goals, 9 assists, 14 points. Not that long ago, I was looking at his point totals and going, looks like Kopitar, he's getting older. This happens, and his points totals have dropped. He's picked it back up again. Darcy Kemper is the starter. He has experienced a bit of a renaissance since returning to the Los Angeles Kings. And definitely the LA Kings and their fans have been the beneficiaries of what's been some pretty strong hockey from Darcy Kemper, and just the Kings in general have been kind of tough to play against, especially at home. So if they keep second place, that means the first 2 games are at home, and if they win both games at home to start the first round series, I really like their odds. But it does look like they're playing the Oilers again. The Oilers have had their number. Will the Oilers have their number again? The Oilers are 8-5-1 over the last month, scoring 3.14 goals per game and allowing 3.07 goals against per game. Leon Draisaitl leading the way in scoring over the last month. Just 10 games played, but 8 goals, 7 assists, 15 points. And the goaltending. Is it going to be Skinner? Is Skinner going to be good to go for the start of the playoffs? Will it be Pickard who ends up getting that starter's job? If Pickard's played well enough between now and when Skinner returns, maybe he ends up getting that start in game 1. But there's a lot of question marks around the Oilers. I don't get the feeling that the Oilers, of the teams in the West, would be one that teams are necessarily scared of. I think that with McDavid being out right now, and just the key injuries that they've been dealing with, and some of their numbers not being fantastic, I don't think teams are scared of the Oilers like they may have been, say, last year and previous years. So another Stanley Cup final run? Maybe. Absolutely they could. But at this point in time, it doesn't look likely. So that first round series against LA, maybe it's LA's turn. Minnesota, 6-6-3 over the last month, scoring 2.27 goals per game and allowing 2.8 goals against per game. So their goals against is a little bit high compared to a lot of the other teams on the board. But that goal scored, 2.27, I think it's the lowest number on the board. Let me just verify. I'm pretty sure that's, a little bit worse than what we're seeing from Florida, 2.31 goals per game. Didn't see that coming. Matt Boldy, the leading scorer for Minnesota over the last month, 15 games, 4 goals, 8 assists, 12 points. This team desperately needs Kaprizov and Eriksson. This team desperately needs to get healthy. They have desperately needed to get healthy for months. It's part of the reason they're 6-6-3 over the last month. Gustafsson's the starting goaltender. Gustafsson can be inconsistent and sort of up and down in his play, but I do think that he can be a solid starter for them come playoff time. But of the teams on the board, I would say teams are least frightened by Montreal, and I would say Minnesota's probably second. Least likely to frighten a team going into the first round of the playoffs. And it's too bad because for Minnesota, I think a nice long playoff run would be great. It just doesn't feel like it's in the offing this season. And if they do get a first round matchup with the Jets, I think the Jets match up really well with Minnesota. And I don't know how long that series would go if that's the case. And then there's St. Louis. By the tiebreaker, Minnesota's ahead of St. Louis, but they're definitely not trending in the same direction. St. Louis 12-1-1 over the last month. So 10-game winning streak that they have on the line tonight and all that. 3.64 goals scored per game. 1.86 goals against per game. So just behind LA in goals against and just ahead of Colorado in goals against. There are some stingy teams out west. Scoring has definitely come down a bit for some of these teams, but the goals against are really low. Thomas, the leading scorer for St. Louis over the last month, 14 games, 3 goals, 16 assists, 19 points. Binnington is maybe due for another run. I have talked before about how, Binnington's in that is he overrated, is he underrated category, and maybe we've been underrating him this year, and Four Nations showed us how good he could be. And coming out of Four Nations, obviously his numbers have been great, and Hofer's been good as the backup too, but obviously it is Binnington's net. This is a team that's really dangerous, and they don't look dissimilar from the team that won the Stanley Cup back in 2019. So this is a talented team, a confident team, and they're hot at exactly the right time. So my question to people watching this video is simple. Which of these teams on the board would you least like to see the team you root for, and it might be a team that's out of the playoffs, play against in the first round? Which team would you most like to see a team you root for play against in the first round that you say, I am not scared of? Insert name a team here. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. I just thought this was a fun video to do for today, so hopefully you've enjoyed it. Thank you guys for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.